Hello and welcome into a brand new edition of the Patriots Hub Podcast. Alex, Barth, Matt Dolloff with you. I'm here live at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, where Combine Week kicked off today, Dolph. It is, I was saying to Andrew Callahan earlier, and I said this to him at about 3 o'clock, already one of the busiest days I've ever had professionally. It's been nonstop here. A lot of news, a lot of information. We've been busy, a lot of content up right now on 98.5thesportshub.com. on the social media apps, on YouTube. So I, kind of catch the breath. Let's actually talk some football here. I figure for the next 30 minutes, because we got a lot of football information today, in particular from Mike Vrabel, who spoke this morning. It was the first time we've heard from him since his introductory press conference, for the first time since they built the coaching staff. And he talked a lot. He did 15 minutes at the podium. He did then another 10 to 15 minutes a scrum with the local reporters. So we got a lot. We got a lot from Mike Vrabel today.
Cool.
I'll leave it up to you where we want to start, because there are a number of interesting things. I talked about an aggressive offseason, talked about his coaching staff. Where do you want to begin here?
I guess we could start with Vrabel talking about the offseason and free agency. And he said, hopefully we're aggressive. He said later on, I'm confident we're going to be aggressive. I guess it's part of the business that we're in to sort of read between the lines and try to read into things as much as we can. The words hopefully and hopeful and all its variants didn't have me feeling that good about what Vrabel was saying. But like the way he said hopefully aggressive is sort of like, well, I can't imagine we wouldn't be aggressive, because you look at the amount of cap space they have. But yeah, it's just a question of how aggressive they are. Is it anything close to what they did in 2021 with all that spending? I think maybe the final amount of how much they spent could be similar. Maybe if it's a little less, because that was like the craziest spending spree we ever saw. But I mean, realistically, Barth, they have to make some kind of splash. And Vrabel talked a little bit about the day one part of free agency, the early part of free agency, and the teams overspend sometimes. And, he made the car dealership analogy where it's like, if there's only one car and you really want that car, you might have to overpay for it. And so I think they need to find a car that they really want and overpay for it. And that doesn't mean that they have to do that throughout the roster. They have to fill all their needs. But I think if Vrabel, especially, but if the Crafts, if they want to send the right message to New England, to Patriots fans, to us, to everybody following the team, they have to make some sort of big move to let them know that we are committed to improving the football team this year. And so I know Vrabel sort of couched it with hopefully we're aggressive, because that doesn't guarantee anything. You can't guarantee that guys are even going to want to sign here. But I feel like they're going to have to maybe be the highest bidder for someone, or make just some kind of big signing. And maybe we'll talk about it as an overpay, but they have to make a move like that. And they have to be aggressive, at least at the start of free agency, make a big move, send a good message, and then go from there.
Yeah, and I liked that he said that, but at the same time, we've talked about this in the past. I think we talked about it last offseason. Aggressive is good, reckless is not, and that can be a thin line. And so he made the point about being aggressive in free agency at the podium, and then he goes and he talks to local reporters 10 minutes later, and he didn't. I don't want to say he walked it back, because he didn't, but he kind of said, we need to go out there, we need to get better, we need to spend. But then he said, we're not going to sign players just to sign players. Yeah. And he talked about how, we need to be ready to pivot. And just because they have all the cap space in the world, to your point, doesn't mean they're going to get everybody, right? It would be great to be able to sit here and say they're going to sign Alaric Jackson and Chris Godwin and Trey Smith and Milton Williams and Javon Holland, right? But that's just realistically not how it happens. And he talked about there needs to be a contingent plan and need to be able to pivot from option one to option two. And because they have so much flexibility, because there really isn't anybody on the roster right now that they're, boxed into keeping outside of the quarterback, which that's a one-of-one position, they need to be able to use that flexibility. I also like that, that him saying that we're not going to sign players just to sign players. He talked about a coverage dictating wide receiver and how important that can be, and he knows how valuable those guys are. He also acknowledged it's hard to get those guys. I think he said something along the lines of they're not just out here walking around, and if they are, let me know, we'll sign them. That you usually have to draft those guys. Sometimes they're available via trade, but I think something that could really be an issue for them this year is, or he acknowledged too, they need that guy, and they're going to be aggressive in trying to get that kind of player, as they should. But that can't turn into, well, Chris Godwin's the best receiver available. and we need a coverage dictating wide receiver. So yes, like he'll be that guy, or like, talking themselves into, yeah, we can fix Cooper Kupp, or maybe overrating a player in the draft because they feel like they just need the position. I think they're going to be aggressive in trying to get that number one wide receiver, but I don't think they're going to force it either, which is important, because if they go out and they pay a ton of money to a guy like Chris Godwin, or a guy like Stephon Diggs coming off a torn ACL. Don't know what happened there with the video.
I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
YouTube people just got discombobulated. Sorry, Barth, continue.
If they pay a ton of money to go out and get one of those kinds of players, and that player doesn't live up to it, well, now you're boxed into that contract. So I think they need to be aggressive, but they also need to be disciplined in getting that kind of player.
I guess I agree to a certain extent on being disciplined, Barth, but I think inevitably they're going to have to overpay someone. Like, I think
so I'm talking about it wide receiver specifically, because there is no Josh Sweat at the wide receiver position. There is no Javon Holland at the wide receiver position. If T. Higgins is available, you pay him. What I'm talking about is I don't want to see them pay Mike Godwin T. Higgins money just because T. Higgins isn't there and they feel like they need a receiver.
Okay, look, if they pay Chris Godwin 4 years, $35 million a year, that's going to be a ridiculous, insane overpay.
That's my point.
And not really a move they need to make. I just don't think it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to get that crazy. I think Chris Godwin is probably going to get a 1 year deal, or if he goes maybe 2 or 3. He's not going to get a big time, long-term deal unless it's from a really stupid team. Like, I guess to your point, like only a really stupid team would make that kind of deal. So I don't
a lot
need
of
the
stupid
Patriots
teams in this league.
I know. I don't need the Patriots to be that team. I don't think they're going to be that team. I think the point, like, they are smart with money. Like, I think that's the problem, like, that people have where we can criticize them for not spending. Well, it's like, well, they don't like usually spend unwisely, which, like, yeah, I get it. But like, eventually they're going to have to overpay someone. And just here's the problem, Barth, is that their biggest needs are at those positions that are premium, highly paid players, receivers, tackles. Like, thank God they don't need a quarterback. Like, they're just going to have to pay a lot of money. So, like, if they go out and they give Alaric Jackson, the similar money to Ronnie Stanley, I'll say, all right, that's a lot of money, but they needed to make that move. And, like, Alaric Jackson's a pretty good player, so I'll take him. Like, they're going to have to bring in someone that's overpaid. And, yes, I don't want them to get too stupid with it. But I think realistically, like, I think T. Higgins is the only guy this offseason, unless they trade for a guy like DK Metcalf or something like that. Like, T. Higgins is the only guy that's going to get a stupid, wild, crazy amount of money. And we're probably going to come out of it saying, like, say they get Chris Godwin or Stephon Diggs or Amari Cooper or whatever, probably going to overpay the guy. Like, they're going to make over $20 million probably. But I don't think it's going to be one of those crazy, stupid deals. And, like, I don't need them to do that. And, like, yeah, Javon Holland, you mentioned, like, they don't need to overspend in the secondary. Like, I think the problem is that they have to sort of spend on their biggest needs, because those are the positions that teams always have to spend on. And so I don't need them to overspend at those other areas of the roster, but they need to fill in those key spots that really put you over the top and make you a good team, especially offensively. Like, those are the positions you have to pay for. And so they're going to have to pay for someone, Barth. Like, I know I don't need them to be reckless. I don't need them to be stupid, but they're going to have to get aggressive and probably pay someone that we're going to come out of it saying they overpaid the person. I think that's just inevitable for this team.
I guess my thing is, like, I would rather, and it would cost more money, right? But because they just need players, I would rather them pay a guy like Javon Holland slightly above market to get him and get like a true high level free safety that's going to impact the way they play defense. I would rather them go a little bit above market for a guy like Javon Holland, who is a good player and probably worth it, as opposed to going more than a little above market for a wide receiver who maybe more plays the position that you need, but isn't going to be the caliber of player you need at that position, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure I agree with that part. I think I'd take the receiver over the safety.
Here's where I'm at this point. Get the best players you can get. And don't box yourself in. And to an extent, like, they need to get a starting left tackle, right? That's the one, honestly, that is a need. You have to get a starting left tackle somehow, some way, free agency, the draft, Alaric Jackson, Will Campbell, like that. But they just need to get better. And, like, a safety will help this team more. Like, a high-level safety will help this team more than a mid-level wide receiver will at this point, I think. So I just want to see him get, get the bang for the buck more so than chasing those needs, because you're going to have multiple offseasons. And it's also because, and this is just more news from today, like the landscape is changing and it's not changing in their favor. Eric DaCosta talked about the expectation is that they'll get a deal done with Ronnie Stanley to bring him back, the left tackle in Baltimore, and Harbaugh echoed that when he spoke a little bit later. Duke Tobin was effusive in saying that they're going to get a long-term deal with T. Higgins. His quote was he won't be concerned until he has a reason to be concerned, although he did say at the same time that Jamar Chase is going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. And then this was actually a funny one. John Schneider, Seahawks general manager, was asked, where do things stand with DK Metcalf? And he kind of laughed and goes, he's on our team and he's really good. I don't know what you mean where things stand. So that veteran market, guys are flying off the board left and right before free agencies even hit. So it's, are you going to chase players? Again, they need that left tackle, but are you going to lose out on the top free agents because you're chasing players who are a tier down, trying to hunt needs, when the reality is just about every position on your roster is a need?
I get it. Yeah, no, I don't think they're going to chase. I think if you're worried about them chasing the one guy, I don't think that's going to be their plan, because Mike Vrabel talked earlier today about having an option A and an option B, and so on and so forth. I don't think they're going to zero in on, like, we have to get, say, Chris Godwin, and so we're going to do everything we can and to do. We're going to outbid everyone, and we have to get Chris Godwin. Like, I'll use a word from Vrabel. Hopefully that's not their plan. I don't think that's their plan. He's talking about having option A and option B. I think they're going to have, a first choice. And if that doesn't work out, they go to the next choice. Like, they're going to have some sort of plan in place. I think that's going to be sort of a departure from what we saw in the last years of Bill Belichick, when he was sort of flying by the seat of his pants, probably putting a little too much on his plate. And so I think Bill Belichick ended up sort of chasing it in a different sort of way. But I think realistically, they're going to have a plan in place. They're going to have a plan B and plan C. And I don't think they're going to chase the one guy. I do think they're going to overpay. Someone's going to get overpaid inevitably. But yeah, I think as long as they fix the tackle spot, if they get a tackle, they tell everyone, we are committed to improving the offensive line. And here's the big money. Here's the big ticket free agent to prove it. Hopefully they pull off something like that, because, I don't expect them realistically to fill all their needs with all these big money signings and chasing after all this big money. Yes, I expect them to spend. I don't think they're going to actually extend themselves, overextend themselves, like you're saying they might. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't know if you're saying they're going to do that, but I think I'm less concerned that they're going to, sort of chase it, as you were saying.
I guess my point,
they're going to have multiple options.
My point is, outside of left tackle, which is a must, I acknowledge, because that's protecting Drake May. You can't have Drake May get hurt. I acknowledge that this is probably a 2-year rebuild. And Mike Vrabel, he did have a good quote today. And he said, he didn't want to put a timetable on it because that's unfair. But he was then asked, are you aware that the fans maybe don't have a stomach for it? And he said, I don't think anybody does. He's like, I'm here to win, right? Everybody's here to win. So, but it's going to be more than 1 year. So you got to get Drake May protected. On top of that, to me, it's just get good players and it'll all work itself out. If you don't get the wide receiver this year, you hammer that next year. If you don't get the pass rusher this year, or the pass rusher that should be able to get this year between the draft free agency, you hammer that next year. They're not building the Super Bowl team this year. It'd be great, but that's just probably not how it's going to go. So instead of trying to we got to round out the roster here and there, no, you got to build the foundation first. I'm more focused on the foundation, and that has a little less preference on positions to me.
I think he's talked so much about improving the lines and protecting the quarterback and getting after the opposing quarterback. I think offensive line and defensive line are where the majority of the big spending is going to come.
I think that's what's going to happen.
If they make a day one splash, they bring in a tackle and a pass rusher, call it whatever spot on the defensive line you want. They sign an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman. This is our big splash. These are our big ticket guys. This is the guys that are going to sort of be the anchor of our offseason in terms of improving the roster. I feel strongly that they're going to do something like that, and I don't think they're going to chase it at wide receiver. I think wide receiver, maybe I'm just projecting what I kind of hope for, but I feel like instinctually I think that they're gonna get someone at wide receiver, but they're not going to make that big time. Not T. Higgins, nothing close to that. Maybe bring in a name like an Amari Cooper or someone like that, but they're not going to really overextend themselves at wide receiver. I think that's going to be the spot that hopefully we're coming out of next year, like we talked about on the last podcast. We're coming out of next year. It's like, okay, now get the wide receiver.
I guess that honestly, that's kind of the point I'm trying to make, is the point you made last week that we've spent the last 5 minutes circling around. That I just, I don't need, the wide receiver doesn't need to be this offseason. On the player personnel, so it's sounding more and more like Mike Vrabel has final say. And that's what makes this all the more interesting. Like, Elliot Wolf will talk tomorrow, and he's here for a reason, right? They're not just going to ignore whatever he says, but it seems like it's on Mike Vrabel's shoulders. How do you feel about that?
Good. I feel similar to what I think you've said before. Maybe you said it on Sunday kickoff or something. But the head coach can be the guy that sort of sets the vision. And so, like, it makes sense for him to have the final say. And the GM, if you want to call it Ryan Cowden later on, like maybe Elliot Wolf is dismissed and Ryan Cowden takes over as, the top personnel guy. Like, he sort of executes the vision of the head coach rather than the other way around. This is Mike Vrabel's football team. This is his football operation. This is his show. And look, nobody's perfect. Like, I don't expect Mike Vrabel to be perfect with his personnel choices. And I think he probably learned a little bit from Tennessee, where I don't think he went in the direction of, I don't think he's going in the direction of, like, I have to have complete control and he's going to, exert too much control and sort of cause dysfunction. I think he's sort of learned from the experience in Tennessee and the probably the dysfunction that caused behind the scenes there. I don't know how much of that was his fault, but, like, I think he learned from that and said that, yes, it needs to be his final say, but I think that he's going to work together with Ryan Cowden, and they have a shared vision, as he's called it. So I think they're going to be on the same page, but I think it makes the most sense for the head coach to have the final say rather than Elliot Wolf or Ryan Cowden. I'm fine with it.
Vrabel also talked a little bit about the coaching staff. We got some news there. Terrell Williams is going to be the defensive play caller. We didn't know. It was kind of up in the air. Would it be him or Mike Vrabel? Vrabel said it's something he's been preparing for. Look, he was an assistant head coach under Vrabel in Tennessee, which tells me that Vrabel sort of always viewed this role for him. And then on Josh McDaniels, he talked about him and McDaniels started talking about working together when Vrabel was still working for Cleveland, which was well before we even knew the Patriots could have a head coaching opening. So a couple nuggets there on the coaching staff we didn't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on either of those.
I mean, the defensive play calling better be good. I mean, like, I don't think it's going to be a thing that, like, sort of sinks the team or anything like that. I don't think it's a fatal flaw, but I think that is another area where we're going 2 years in a row of basically a first-time defensive play caller. And I get it that Terrell Williams has a lot more experience in the league and a lot more respect around the league than DeMarcus Covington ever had. And so, sure, I guess technically you could say he's at a step up from DeMarcus Covington at defensive coordinator, but a bad defensive play call, like, that's what gets you burned for a 60-yard touchdown by DK Metcalf or Cooper Kupp. So, like, I really hope that he doesn't blow one of those play calls where, like, he calls the all-out blitz at a weird time and you get burned by a good, smart quarterback and a talented wide receiver. Like, I think that's where defensive play calling can sort of hurt you. And so I don't expect Terrell Williams to be as much of a mess as DeMarcus Covington was as defensive coordinator, as messy as the Patriots defense was in terms of being unprepared and making bad play calls at the wrong times. Like, I don't think it's going to be as bad. I feel like they will improve in that area, but I think if we're expecting the defense to be all buttoned up and perfect, like, I'm not really expecting that. Maybe Terrell Williams will surprise us and we'll say, okay, this is what he was born to do. And, like, he's finally in the role and he's thriving. Like, hopefully that, again, hopefully it's the word of the day. Hopefully that is the case. But first-time play caller, and I think bad defensive play calls can really burn you in a hurry especially if you're facing a good, smart quarterback and a good offense. So I really hope that part's going to be buttoned up.
I just think to keep in mind, so Vrabel did mention when he talked about Terrell and his experience, mentioned he's coached aggressive defensive linemen. So that makes me think they're going to play a more aggressive style. Vrabel was also asked about just his philosophy on the blitz and said that it's not about how much you blitz, it's when you blitz. And it's knowing to pick your spots, right? And okay, we know we can get this linebacker on the running back, or we know in this situation they do that. So that was the thing. Like I like I said last year, when we talked about some of the blitz tendencies that the Patriots had, it just felt like they were spamming it, and there wasn't a ton of rhyme or reason as to when.
They were just mashing.
Right. And I think that's what it's going to be about. Like, they're going to be an aggressive defense. People may hear that and think they're going to blitz a ton. I think it's more about them picking their spots in aggressive moments and trying to catch teams off guard, or just trying to pick on certain matchups and things like that, which is good. Like, they don't, they have Christian Gonzalez, and it's part of the reason I want them to sign a guy like Javon Holland. Christian Gonzalez, Marcus Jones in the slot. You got two hopefully good box safeties that obviously went through their own different issues last year, but you hope are going to bounce back. If they add one more good corner, and then again, you get a true free safety, which they can do, both of those. If you check out actually on the 98.5 Twitter yesterday, we posted like a build your own offseason sort of thing. You get Javon Holland, you get Carlton Davis. They don't need to blitz a ton with that secondary. Now you're going back to kind of what they were the last iteration of those Super Bowl teams. Where, right, just a bunch of coverage sacks. And you just need guys that are going to clean it up. And I think they're going to have more than just clean it up guys up front, like you talked about before. They've emphasized the front, but they may not, like, if they can roster build into not having to blitz a lot, that's probably the best case scenario, I think, for the kind of defense that they want to play for what we think it is right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Their new like system, philosophy and all that, as far as pressure, isn't it sort of going to emphasize, I guess you could call them edge guys, but like outside linebackers to really make the plays and generate the pressure, and like the defensive tackles, the 3 techniques and the 5 techs, they're just going to be like eating up space, eating up blockers, and sort of open things up for the edge guys to really fly around and make plays. Like, is that an accurate way to describe the defense? And if that's the case, like, who's a good free agent that they could go out that would maybe be able to fill that role and make an impact
on the edge?
Yeah.
I mean, Josh Sweat would be one. Like, well, some of it is it's not so much the defensive tackles are occupying space. It's those guys are more athletic, so they can cover more space. So it's different than like just holding your ground, right? It's the idea that you can move, and like what they did with Jeffrey Simmons, right? Jeffrey Simmons is the perfect kind of defensive tackle for that sort of system. Obviously, he was in it, and it was, he had more range, he had more tackling range and ability to cover ground. So if those edge guys are coming in a little wider, you're not necessarily worried about the gaps in between being as big because this guy can cover more ground and get there. So Christian Barmore, in theory, now we'll see if Barmore's back. Barmore, in theory, in that role makes sense. And maybe you get a second guy to play with him, whether that's a guy like Mason Graham, a guy like Milton Williams. But like in theory, he works in that role.
Okay. So I hope they get Josh Sweat then. That's a long way of saying better be Josh Sweat.
There you go.
Day one.
Anything else stand out to you from today, Patriots-wise, maybe things other people said, other GMs?
Oh, I haven't heard any of the other GMs, to be perfectly honest. You're the one that's down there listening to what everyone's saying.
I'm trying to keep up. It's a lot.
Yeah, like I guess it sounds like Ronnie Stanley's going to stay with the Ravens, and so that's a big name off the board. I never really had too much hope for him. So Alaric Jackson, though, did he play right tackle for the Rams? Would he be a left tackle if they signed him?
He's played both. He'd be a left tackle here.
Okay. All right. So then if it's Alaric Jackson and Josh Sweat day one, they're both making over $20 million. I'm fine with that as their splash.
So before we wrap it up here, what are you looking for the rest of the week? So we'll have Ellie Wolf talks tomorrow. We'll also hear from prospects tomorrow. Abdul Carter, 8 a.m. That's kind of been the joke around here today, is who's going to make it to Abdul Carter tomorrow morning. And then workouts start on Thursday. It'll be defensive linemen, linebackers, and kickers first up, then defensive backs, then it's quarterbacks, receivers, and running backs. And of course, we have to wait all the way till the end, till Saturday and Sunday, for Will Campbell and the offensive linemen. So I'm interested to hear Travis Hunter's podium will be Thursday. I'm going to be interested to hear that. We did find out the Browns GM, Barry, said that they view Hunter primarily as a receiver. So that's not just a team that does that. It's a team ahead of the Patriots that views Travis Hunter as a receiver. So that maybe is notable. And I talked to Andrew Callahan earlier, who said that, I don't know about what, but like Patriots and the Browns maybe having some discussions. So what happens with that pick? And then Hunter's workout, obviously. I also want to, so you're starting to get the trickle of, Abdul Carter's not working out. The quarterbacks aren't working out. They're not doing the on-field, which is like, we're used to this at this point. The top players generally don't work out because they can't really help their stock. They can only hurt it. As far as I know, and let me double check if I say this, because like I said today, I've been running around like crazy. We still have not heard if McMillan will work out or not. And his testing is going to be very telling because he's just not viewed as that top tier athlete. There's things he does very well, but he's not fast. And, there's some questions about his ability to separate. So if he does work out, I think that's going to be one of the most impactful workouts of the week. And I'm not seeing anything that he's not working out. So We're recording this at 4:30 on Tuesday. Maybe that report comes out tomorrow. Again, receivers don't get here till a little later, so he doesn't have to make that decision yet. But if he works out his workout, because you talk to different people and the expectations for what he would test at physically, you get a wide range. I don't think anybody really has like a true idea of what to expect from him athletically.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think speed and separation are relatively overrated. I think people, Tyquan Thornton had a lot of speed and could separate, I guess. How'd that work?
Well, I think the question is, like, he's not slow. He's definitely not slow, but he's not fast either. And so you get into that like functional speed, right? Like the people that don't like McMillan uses N'Keal Harry. He's pulling away from guys in the Pac-12. He's using his size, which he's not going to be as physically dominant in the NFL. Speed's overrated in the Tyquan Thornton sense, yes. I think there's another extreme to it as well, where even if you are kind of elusive, if you can't run away from it, and not that N'Keal Harry was elusive either, but like with McMillan, even if you are elusive, eventually guys are just going to run you down from behind, and it's not going to matter.
Okay, I mean, I don't need my receivers to be running away from guys for 90-yard touchdowns either. Like, if he can get open and catch the ball, I'm okay with him not getting a 90-yard touchdown because he has that breakaway speed. Like, yeah, ideally you have that, but yeah, like it'll be interesting to see what his 40 time is, and if there's another receiver that sort of pops because he had a great 40 time. But to me, I care more about being able to run routes and actually catch the ball when it's thrown to you, and guys can get open without having blazing speed. And so if there's questions about Ted McMillan in that regard, I get it. But I don't know that the Patriots would even draft him anyway unless maybe they trade down. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he sort of measures. But I think as far as like who are the Patriots meeting with and who are they talking to, like I'm interested to hear that on like the Travis Hunter front, if there's any interest there, and like whatever the reports come out. I tend to believe the opposite of what's like reported about players in the Patriots. Patriots are really interested in this guy. I tend to interpret that as non-interest, and so and vice versa. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out as what's reported, who's meeting with who. And then we can maybe get a better idea of where the Patriots are leaning in terms of who they're interested in, what they're going to do at the draft. That's what I'm going to be listening for.
Well, we will have a lot more coming the next couple of days on 985thesportshub.com, on the Sports Hub YouTube page, across all of these social media channels as well. Matt and I, we got to figure out when we'll do the next pod. We might do one before the rest of the workouts. Got to see how the rest of the week shakes out, or we will be back next week to react to everything from the combine. I'll have some more interviews though on this channel. I spoke to Jeff Howe earlier. I'm going to have some national guests lined up tomorrow. Some more draft expert type people, so you can kind of get a shake of the board. So you can make sure you subscribe here to check that out as well. But until the next one, for Matt Dolloff, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.